A glacier iceberg, we know what an iceberg is. Something that can sink a whole Titanic of a ship. It's made out of fresh water that became all connected together and made one big pillar that sticks out of the water in a tremendous, glorious sight. What's incredible about the iceberg is, even when you look at it and it looks so tall on top of the water, and it's something that's floating on top of the water because it's fresh water on top of salt water, for some reason it doesn't move from one place to the next. It stays afloat, but it doesn't move from one place to the next. And the reason is because the part that you're seeing is only 10% of the whole iceberg. 90% of an iceberg is underneath the water. It's an incredible edifice that can go and tower over 700 feet, which can be the size of the Empire State Building, an incredible thing that is able to be, and it's anchored down into the water, which means that even if you see an iceberg and it looks nice and big, and it gets very marshim, as they say, it gives them a nice impression, but the majority of what you're seeing is, as the expression goes, only the tip of the iceberg. It's only the tip of the iceberg, it's only external, it's not something that you really see. If you would melt down a full iceberg, sometimes, you'd be able to fill up over 460 Olympic-sized pools from it. It's massive. Like I said, it's hundreds and hundreds of feet, over 300 meters. It's the size of a skyscraper, but when you look at it, it's not as impressive as if you would see the whole entire thing from the bottom to the top, because the majority of it is hiding underneath the water. You guys have no idea why I'm introducing this subject with this idea, but because the whole subject of our today is an introduction to speak about what the tip of the iceberg is. And what I'm trying to say is today, the truth is, my main focus, what I really want to speak about is teenagers, the older ages, especially difficult teenagers, which I'm sure nobody has, but maybe help your neighbors, B'ezrat Hashem, when it comes up. But as an introduction, Kebiyochel, to that, and also that some people want to hear about the younger ages, I'm going to give one main yesod which has to do with Chinuch from the youngest ages to the oldest ages. A very important yesod with many examples, and from here I think we're going to get a good understanding how to carry it over into the older ages also, B'ezrat Hashem. But it's an important yesod which I believe that all of Chinuch is based on it. I don't always hear it so much in the Chinuch Sherm, and you'll see this idea, which you'll see how it overlaps after I give you the examples, you get a much better idea. And basically there's two ways of dealing with children, of dealing what we call Chinuch, of being able to do things. The first type of way is dealing in a behavioral way, the manners, the behaviors, the way that we take care of them. It means also giving prizes, disciplining them, modeling, giving our fantastic parental speeches that we're also good at. We're very impressive at always giving our speeches and our hartzaot, as they say, to be able to teach them what they need to do. Teaching them manners, behavior, like I said, punishment, whatever is required to be able to do what we call discipline. That is what I'm trying to say, the tip of the iceberg. It's good, it's also effective, but you should know you're doing 10% of the job. 90% of the iceberg lies underneath the water. It's much more hidden. It's known as more of the Pnimi, the more hidden and discrepant type of behavioral that we try to take care of our chinuch. Most people, the majority of people, just deal with what we call the tip of the iceberg, the top. And it looks impressive. I said, when you look at an iceberg, it looks like it has a lot. But we just go straight to the tips, to what needs to be said, the channels that need to be spoken out. We speak about many times what has to be answered. And that's why sometimes it's limiting. It happens immediately, we get immediate results, and we're happy with them. We're satisfied with them, but you should know that it ends up being a little bit of a temporary solution. It's not where. The real way, and the best way, and the most effective way of doing chinuch is going to the bottom 90%, which is under the water. You don't see it. It's a little bit more hidden, but it's going to the pnimi of the child. It works a little bit, as we say, with behavioral patterns, focusing on the child and what lies behind the child, behind his actions. Now, really, you would think that by doing this, you've got to be a good psychologist to be able to figure this out, but not necessarily. You just have to be able to look into a child, because there's no one that knows a child better than, of course, yourself, to make the connection, get an emotional understanding, a more pnimi understanding into the child, and by that, you'll be able to change him in a totally different way. It won't be just something that happens direct on the spot, boom, and I finished, and I took care of the solution. I worked at it. It's something that's much more, let's say, indirect, roundabout, but in the end of the day, the results are much more mufnam, much more pnimi, that goes into the child. I'll give you a good example. Straightforward, simple example. Like I said, in the future we'll give you more examples, which are even more practical. But a classic example of something that happened a few, let's say half a year ago or something, in the case that I know, that a child was stealing money from his mother's purse. He was stealing money from his mother's purse, and he was going and buying things here and there, probably especially food and treats and all these types of things, but also buying other things. But it was found, and the school found out that he, Baruch Hashem, was a wealthy child. He seemed to have the money spilling out of his pockets. And you know, these things go when the kid is young enough, they can't keep a secret too well. So they're figuring it out. So here he is, the child, the parents who immediately were trying to be what we call Mechanech. They were trying to do the Chinuch. So the first thing they do is, of course, hid their mother's purse a lot better. He hid the mother's purse a lot better. That was one of the eitzahs to be able to do that. Now it's another thing. Second thing, of course, which would be the second eitzah, which most people don't understand, maybe if you go to share, to give a nice hartzah, to go give him a nice speech about honesty, about being a good Jew, how only Arabs steal, and that's part of their mitzvah of being able to steal, and we're not like them, and trying to give some type of integrity type of speech, and trying to make him realize that, you know, Zelo b'shvalano, that's not good, what a big aver it is, lo tignov. It's Kebiyocho, one of the Ten Commandments, which it's really not. The Ten Commandments talking about kidnapping, but it's one of the averot in the Torah. It's very serious. It's another way. A third way, and this is a practical aids, and you should know that there's such a thing as called punishing. Yes, and punishing, which we'll speak about, Be'ezrat Hashem, is also a relevant way of taking care of it. You punish him for stealing, so he'll try not to do it. Now, practically speaking, and again, we've spoken about this a little in the Chinuch shirim, so these things, as I say, I'm being mikatzer, I'm speaking more to the point about things that we've spoken about in the past, but punishing, real punishing, should not be abstract, meaning just because he stole, so now he stays home for 3 days. There's no kesher, there's no thing. Just because a guy did something not nice, so he's in jail. What's the connection between jail and being over a felony? We try to give punishments which are a direct cause and effect to the thing that he did. To whatever avli he did, whatever he did wrong, we're supposed to directly give him a punishment. That's an action-reaction, cause and effect. That's the best way, so that way he feels it. If a kid steals, so the best way is if he has an allowance, so we'll have to take it out of your allowance. If not, so we'll have him do a few chores in the house, which earns him a little bit of money, and that money will end up being what he ends up having to pay back for what he took. That's a type of punishment, which is the more ideal punishment. Not stam, a scream, a yell, a hit. That doesn't do anything. Doesn't even cause the effect. That's not even the tip of the iceberg part. Okay, even if we're talking about the tip of the iceberg, the external type of behavior that we're trying to take care of, at least it should be according to the rules. It should be with a cause and reaction, the action reaction. That's what a real punishment is supposed to be. Like I said, a speech or anything like that. But a person who's a Mechanech, a person who's looking to the 90% that's underneath the glacier water, something that can sink the Titanic, something that has such power, a person looks into the Pnimi of the child. He's much more focused on his Pnimi, what lies behind such an action. Now again, if we're not experienced, Be'ezrat Hashem, your wife is experienced, maybe you have a spouse that's able to do it, and if not, so we have to ask a third party. We have to go to someone who might know how to do it. If it means going to a therapist and you have to pay $1, or if you go to the rabbi who's for free, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about, but at least you try to figure out someone that's able to be an eitzah to go to someone to do it. And many times it's something that's much more pnimi, such as this is a classic example for such a thing, would be attention. He's looking for attention. He knows that he's lacking attention, a lack of bitachon etzmi, of self-esteem for doing such a thing. Or pashut, he just says taivas. It could be just a simple taivas because they're very into sweets or want something very sweet. He wants to be able to get it. Or, and this was in this particular case, which I'm thinking about, that happened about a year ago to a year ago, I don't remember exactly. And this was the guess that I had, and I was actually accurate in this case. It was a family that was having serious monetary issues, and all they spoke about in the house all day was money. That's what it was about this money and that money, and how we're going to do this. And this, I wasn't there, but it could have been like, it's your fault, and it's your fault, and why can't you get a job? Why can't you do that? There was a lot of discussion about money in the house. And nobody thinks that the 7-year-old hears these things, but the 7-year-old hears everything. As we all know, they hear much better than your wife does. And in the end of the day, they end up hearing everything, and therefore he decided that money is something that is extremely important, something very of value, something very valuable. So in the meantime, he's stealing money from his mother's purse, and 13, he'll probably go get a job and then skip out of school, because that's something that seems to be something that's very prioritized, and that's what it is. Again, everything happens in its own perspective, everything has deeper reasons. But the difference between the first solution is you took care of the problem. You had a hammer and a nail, you slammed it in, you took care of it, but it doesn't mean that it won't come out again. As opposed to the second way, when you focus on the individual issue, you go to the depth of what's going on, you try to focus of where it is, then you end up being able to solve the child, not just solve the problem. Okay, you're able to get to much more an in-depth view of what it is. There's an expression that we know in English, that boils down to this idea: man is greater than the sum of his parts. We're familiar with this expression? This is man is greater than the sum of his parts. We usually focus on the parts of a person, the individual thing. He did this, or he did that, or this happened, or she did this. The individual person, we focus on that. And many, unfortunately, of our disagreements, our spats with our spouse, also could be about this that happened. Instead of going to the sum of the parts, to focus on the mensch, on the person itself, to know where is this coming from. Maybe there's something that's consistently occurring. Right? Maybe it's happening on a consistent basis, and maybe there's a reason for it. And therefore, that requires, and it means a little bit more work. Yes, it does take a little bit more of work. Listen to the words of the Chovet Talmidim. The Chovet Talmidim was written almost over 80 years ago by the Piazenza Rav, and you should know that many of the Chinuch stuff in there, it all overlaps into Chinuch that we can learn nowadays also. The Mechanechim, somewhat, not so often, maybe not even often enough, quote him, but it's a very important sefer, and it's like I said, it's an old sefer. It's not something from nowadays. But most of over there he writes in Perek Hey, he says like this: the Mechanech, the person who's Mechanech al pi tzivui, someone who does al pi commands and telling and habits. He doesn't have to think very much. You do what you have to do, and you just take care of what needs to be done. You go to a couple shiurim, or you read a couple books, and you already have your pointers, you have your bullet points, you know exactly what you to do. Aval mechanech hamenaseh, but a real mechanech who tries to be machdir lenishmat hayeled, to go to the depths of the child, by being midbonen, and he says three things: the sechel, drachav, and ishiyut, his intelligence, his nature, and his personality. That's the three words that he means. That's how I'm defining it, at least. Ma mafriya ma ohev, what bothers him? What does he love? What does he not like? What's bothering? What gets to his ways? And therefore, by doing that, he doesn't necessarily learn, like we said, at the individual pieces of things that he does, but he looks at the whole picture of the child. He tries to look into what he can do, and of course, there are popular words, and here it applies, but this is not the focus, what I'm going to focus on today. Hanoch lenar al pi darko. That is the statement of statements that we know when every chinuch shir has to open up with. Hanoch lenar al pi darko. The Psukim in Mishlei, which the smartest of all men told us. But Hanoch lenar al pi darko means each individual child has his own Mehalach. And therefore, just because you're Mechanech one child with this way, doesn't mean you're Mechanech with that way. If everyone you're Mechanech the same way, so every child that steals gets the same type of punishment, which we said, cause, result, you give him that punishment. He deserves the same speech, whatever speech he's supposed to get, that's what he gets. Every child should get what he gets. But when we talk about Hanoch lenar al pi darko, so now I'm looking at the mensch, I'm looking at the child, I'm looking at the whole person. And again, and I say this very strongly, the only person that knows this child best is you and your wife. Maybe your wife better than you, but bikaron, you're the ones who are able to know the child at his peak. And I mean that to exclude the teacher or the principal or all the other ones that give him a hakachainik for everything that he does, because they're not responsible for the 33 children that are in the class, which that's just the way the world is. And malasot kolkach. You're the one who gives the child his name. Where does the child get his name from? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the gift of a name which stays with a child forever from his parents. Why? Because the name is the ofi of a child. That's the atzmiut, that's the being of a child. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that the person who knows that best is you. The parent is the one who knows the intrinsic being of the child. He's the one who's able to figure him out. And therefore, you get this matana of giving him a name. And therefore, you're responsible also for the next amount of years that he's in your household, at least. I'm not going to give a number. For however many years that he's in your household to be able to take care of him. They say from the Divrei Chaim, the Tzanzer and the Tzanzer Hasidim, you should know, was a little bit different. Over there, they always had a Brit Milah. The Tzanzer Rebbe, the Divrei Chaim, was always the Sandik. He was the Gadol Ador, unbelievable Talmid Chacham. It's from unbelievable. He was always the Sandik, and they always had the Brit Milah. And then they say, V'yikaresh Shmo b'Yisrael. And the Rav said the name. The Rebbe was always saying the name. Over there, the Rav would say the name. The father just stood quietly. Nice, easy job that the father got to go. Didn't have to speak. Didn't have to say the name either. It's great. The Rav took care of it, but Baruch Hashem, that's not our Mehalach. But anyways, that's this idea of being able to understand, to look at a child for his whole perspective. Which means, when we're discussing this idea, that what we're trying to say is when we discuss Chinuch, we will not be speaking about, and one should not speak about, if I could say, almost, not should, I shouldn't say shouldn't, but it's as less effective. It's only the 10% of the iceberg on top of the water, is when you speak about a shita, when you speak about a system. A shita, this is the shita. This is how you do it. You buy a computer, you open the book, you flip through the 5,000 pages that are in there, how to be able to work the thing and how to be able to look at it and deal with it. That's one way of doing it, because a computer is black and white, or at least used to be, right? To a certain extent black and white. Now it has personality and there's a lot of regret, and you can talk back to you, etc. I'm talking about a classic computer robot that does, and therefore that's the idea of giving a shita, a system that doesn't. Real way to be able to hear a shir, and this is going to be our approach for these 5 shirim, more or less, is going to be an approach, a gisha, not necessarily a system, not do's and don'ts, yes and no, this says this says that. It's more of a system, how to be able to take something. It's not just halacha l'maisa, this is how we do it. We go with the system, kishem she'ein partzufeim domim, just like we know each child is different. Any parent who has 2 children, kal v'chaimer if you have 20 children, right? Then we all know that once you see 2 children and never the 2 shall meet. They have no similarities. No, they have a little bit similarities. They have the same parents maybe. But bikaran, yeah, they don't, they're so they could be mamish twins. They could mamish be twins, and we still see the incredible differences between one and the next. Kishem shein partzufeim domim, kach deoteim enam domim. So do we know that each dea has its own opinion, and therefore this is the difference. When you speak about behaviors, like I said, each child will get the same result. It doesn't make a difference. And therefore, all I have to do is come to a class and be able to hear, do this and don't do this. And when he does this, do that. But when you speak about getting a full breakup of the child, so then we have to work in a little bit of a different system. It's a system of kind of like, how do you take the scenario and work with it? How do you take the scenario of work with it to be able to do it? We know, the Chazal say, Ki Adam Etz Hasadeh. A person is compared to a tree. Now, there are many different explanations. We speak about it on Tu B'Shvat. We have a couple shiurim on it. But in the Chinuch world, the idea of Ki Adam Eitz Hasadeh is by a tree, you cannot make it grow. You don't make it grow. It grows by itself. If you try to make it grow, you see it growing. You see the sapling a little growing, going, oh, this is great. I'm so excited. I can't wait till it grows. Let's pick it up. Oh, boy, you just killed it, right? You just destroyed the whole thing. You pull it out of the ground. It's finished. That doesn't work like that. You want it to grow, it's got to grow invisibly slow on its own. Your job is basically to put a little water, to add, make sure it gets enough sunlight, to be able to make sure it's planted in the correct way. And by doing that, you're able to help it, not necessarily with do's and don'ts, just by giving it the surroundings that it needs. And by that, you will be able to take care of it, okay? And that's the way you can be able to take care of a child. And yes, we live in a very difficult generation. We live in a generation where 80 years ago, 70 years ago, go look it up. There's no shiurim on any of the subject. No one spoke about Chinuch, no one did anything. People just raised their kids. And Baruch Hashem, they came out, look at all of us, right? Great kids, Baruch Hashem, they did okay. Our kids, different story. I'm saying it, but I'm just saying, right? It was much more straightforward. They lived, first of all, unfortunately, we live in many, let's say especially, whatever, I'm not going to make any categories of groupings, but single-parent families, divorced families is a big nezek, massive nezek, as we all know, which maybe we'll speak about, but Zot Hashem, it's relevant, obviously, for many kids who go off the derech. That's one of the prime, that's one of the number one, I won't say number one, but it's one of the big things on the board of what causes. But single-parent families, it's not because you're only raised by a single parent, but because they heard so much bad-mouthing about another parent, they have no need to respect an adult, period. In other words, people think that by saying something negative about a spouse, so they'll have something negative about the spouse, but they don't realize you're shooting yourself in the leg. Mamash backfires back on the person also, because they say, no, all adults have no credence. They have no reason for me to look up to them. Me and adults are in the same parsha. There's no difference between me and a child because he's stupid and I'm stupid. Say we're all stupid, so it's great. You know, it's all the same thing. When a person does away with the koach of a figure that we call a parent, when you do away, you've destroyed his whole backlash of everything that has to do with parenting and everything that has to do, and therefore he needs not to be disciplined or to listen to a parent at all. So that's a big problem, in our generation. And even when we have 2 parents, because it's a situation for whatever reason it is, but we know both parents at most of the time are working or they're out. Most parents are not. In the olden days, there was such a thing as a woman being at home and being able to take care of the kids and raising them with in her bosom to be able to raise her very closely to her. And unfortunately, yes, that's the situation these days. We have 2-income families. And of course, I don't have to mention, because we'll, Be'ezrat Hashem B'li Neder, spend probably a whole share on this, but we are in a generation that has more addictions than I think all the not just in the past, all the generations together, if you put them all together, I don't think they've been as addicted to what we're surrounded by. We have people that they spend billions of dollars just to make sure that we are addicted. They work on us just to make sure we're addicted. That's their whole tachlit hachaim. They're born just to make people addicted. Obviously, I'm referring to internet, to smartphones, to everything that they are surrounded by, and every other type of addiction. They bring from Rav Steinman, and the Rav Steinman said, Baruch Hashem, he wasn't raised in this door because he doesn't think he would be able to, he doesn't know if he'd be religious if he was raised in this door. He said a very strong lashon. I don't know where I would be holding if I was raised in this door. Rav Steinman saying Baruch Hashem, I was raised in the previous dorot. Because of that reason. It's a danger that we are surrounded by, and it's not easy. But there's an expression that I one time saw says, it's easier to build strong children, and today we're in the younger category, like I said, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. So that's an expression that should be remembered. It's easier to raise strong children than to repair broken adults, because once they're broken, like we said, we'll have a few more shir. But the focus is more on the previous, on the, before you get to the broken part, to be able to work on them, to be able to get to a stage of being taken care of it. And like I said, it's not a matter of do this, don't do this. It's also that. And we have to know what to do. And I'm going to speak, don't worry, we'll speak out things like that. But that's not the focus. The focus is looking at the whole picture, at being able to focus as the sum of his parts, to be able to do what, to be able to take care of what he can do. When the Chofetz Chaim was asked when Chinuch begins, or when I should start my Chinuch, when's the appropriate time? So the classic answer that he gave was 20 years ago. Right? You ever heard that answer? 20 years ago, he said. You should have started way before you were married, way before you had a child. It starts with you. Real chinuch starts with yourself. Now, what he meant to say is when a parent is a healthy parent, when a child sees a parent with self-esteem, when he sees a parent who's not negative, who has a certain positive outlook to life, who's interested and cares with a passion for what he's doing, especially in Torah and Yiddishkeit or whatever it is, so that spills over to the child. It's much more into the giving over of the child of what we do to ourselves. You understand? If it's real, that's what I'm trying to speak out. It's not a matter of reading a book and doing what needs to be done. It has to be real. It has to be passionate. It has to come to a thing. Many times when I come to a shir, I'm telling you, sometimes I feel like I prepared a shir and this and that, but I don't feel passionate about it. I don't feel so much about it. And it's a fizz. It fuzzles out. It doesn't do anything. I'd rather not be at a camera. I'd rather not even watch it. You have to feel for it. If you don't feel for it, you're not going to be able to give over or display the information. You can tell sometimes. I'm very into like seeing people who speak sometimes. You can see people who are there just as a robotic figures kind of saying over information in order to pull off a shir or a class or what we call a sadna is a workshop or something like that. If it's out of Rata, people who believe in this stuff, it's given over much more. And those are the people that are successful. Everybody's been on a plane here before. That's how, and we all know that when you go on the plane, you've heard that same rerun all the time of the stewardesses always telling you that this is what you have to do, and in case there's a crash, and you have to do this, and all the stewards. And what's always the famous thing that they always say? That when the oxygen comes down, you got to put it on yourself first, and then you got to put it on the child. What a frustrating thing. What are you talking about? We grew up that you're supposed to take care of your kids. The kids come first. Why are you pulling this off? That's not true. You should go ahead and take care of yourself first. But the answer is, and it's a true answer, if you're not disciplined, if you don't have self-control, if you're not relaxed, you can't help your children. You're just not going to help your children. It's going to spill over to your children. The same nezek is going to happen. The same problem is going to happen. You have to be able to take care of yourself to be able to be relaxed. They have to be able to see a calm parent, a person who's in control, a person who knows what he's doing, and only then you'll be able to take care of it. So that's what I mean, a certain passion. I'll tell you, just coming to a chinuch shir is already a good hatchala. That shows the people who are interested. And I'll tell you the truth, many of the time, and I expected this, many of the time, the people that I know who are not necessarily the best mechanech, they never come to the sherm. And I can think of a few in my head. They never come. And it just says something about it. And I'm not going to tell you about their children either. But I'm just trying to point out that a lot of times it just shows when a person's interested in doing it, that's how it works. And that's the yesod of the hagdama that we're talking about. When a person receives treatment, there's two ways of a person who lo aleinu is sick. Some way a person can receive is what we call treatment. Lo aleinu, if a person has the machalah, cancer, chas v'shalom, that a person has a sickness. So these days they still haven't figured out a proper remedy for it. What do? They don't give you a remedy. They don't give the person a remedy. They give him treatment. They explode his whole body by giving radiation. They basically radiate the whole body. And lo aleinu, it has its effects on everything. That's not really called a remedy, that's called a treatment. That's just a atomic bomb that goes into and all the effects occur inside the body. What we're focusing on much more when we're trying to be mechanech is going to the remedy, to try and be able to figure out how to take care of the problem, to focus on where it needs to be able to get there. And when you make a focus, when you have a yad, when you like a sharpshooter pinpointed, so you don't have to have all the side effects. All the side effects blow to the side. You'll be able to repair the problem much more effectively. That's the yesod. Okay, so now I'm going to give you the ya'ad, the matara, the purpose of what we're getting to, and then with that we'll give a number of examples so you'll understand where I'm coming from. Is that Hashem? Okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'kol nivra.
Amen.
I'll give you a good Israeli example, because I know you guys will relate to this example. But just through this example, I think you'll understand what our purpose is over here. And that is, many people might have taken workers into their house. You know, it's a kablan, or a person who's fixing electricity, or to do shiputzim in your house, meaning fixing up things in your house. And many times, what's very interesting, and this is a klal that I've learned the hard way, my wife keeps telling me I keep making the same mistake. But the klal is, when you have these workers over, you never pay them till they finish the last nail. You never pay them you never finish paying them. At least you do that. If you pay them, for some reason they suddenly stop answering their phone. You don't know what happened. I hope everybody's okay. Someone got sick, they just stop answering, and you always have your zecher l'chorban that's left over somewhere in the house to be able to finish up, and that happens. And you wonder, and when I think about it, I always wonder and query, what did the person say from such a thing? And I bumped into this many times. They did good work, decent work, until the 80% they did. And the last 20%, the tip of the iceberg, the last bit that they didn't do, they left over. Why? They saved themselves some time, a few pennies, saved themselves, let's say, a couple thousand shekel. But how much did they lose from such a thing? I will never call a person again. Mamash, you will never call such a person again. Not only will you not call a person again, you won't recommend it again, right? I'm telling you, I even had someone that was doing shiputzim for me, and in the middle I was recommending him to this person, that person, and suddenly the guy ditched out in the middle. He completely thing, because I made that funny mistake again. I always feel bad for people. I'm too much of a rachman, so I ended up paying the last payment, and that's it. For some reason, he's still not answering my phone calls. Where did that come? What the problem with such a person is the person is forgetting the purpose. He's only thinking about the matara. He's forgetting what you're getting to. He's only thinking about the way to get there. In other words, many people only think short-sightedly. He's trying to save himself a buck, so he stops calling, but he forgets to look at the long run of what the person can actually gain from such a thing. If you would follow up on this little 20%, do you know how much future customers you would have? Do you know how many more jobs I would have given him if it wasn't for that? It's such a short-sightedness that we end up forgetting sometimes of what it is. That's it. And I always tell my relatives who come here, they say in Israel everything comes a little bit late. Certain cereals, certain things, certain good products that develop in America, it comes here just a little bit late. So customer service is a little bit delayed here. Hasn't made it yet, but it's on its way. That's what is happening. But that's the difference. As opposed to, I'll show a contrast, and even I'm not trying to show any advertisements here at all. But as I read an article once about the biggest success of Amazon, the reason why it was is he was crazy about customer service. He himself answered the phone sometimes, this Bezos. He was crazy about customer service, and we all know that you can get your return anytime. And that was his knockout punch. 90% of his success was because of that. I'm not talking to you about his employee service over there. It was horrible, right? He was a tyrant. But Bikaron, mitzad his customer service, it was very valuable. And that's why people value, and that's why people go there and use him as their ketovet for that reason, and that's how he became a multi-billionaire, for that reason. What I'm focusing on here and I'm trying to bring out is, and this is the bottom line of today's shir, if this is the one thing you have to remember, always focus on the purpose. Don't focus on the means, focus on the ends. What am I coming to get to? My focus is, what am I trying to get to when I'm being Mechanech my child? Don't focus on how I get there. Sometimes you need to know how, but if you focus on that, a lot of times you will make a mistake. I'm going to give you a lot of examples. Focus on the ya'ad, the purpose of getting there. Otherwise, you miss the whole boat. You end up missing the whole boat. You end up cutting corners in places you should not be cutting corners. Or you end up acting because my stomach tells me to react this way, and it's a mistake just because I want to do it. Just because I want to do it. Just because I want my child to be able to say Shemona Esrei, the whole Shemona Esrei, doesn't mean that nudging him in the middle of Shemona Esrei is going to get him to be doing it forever. That's not necessarily going to be the answer. Just because that's usually my passion right now, I want him to be able to, what's going on? You look over, and he's spacing out into Shamayim. He's spacing out into Shamayim. So you quickly give him the nudge in order to be able to do that nudge. Then, as I one time heard, every time you nudge your child to be able to daven or something, the first thing he does is turn the page. Something happens. Something turns the page. Something, at least he feels like he did something. Like he turns the page in the book, right? Just because we feel maybe that's something that I did, something I accomplished, something that means that you're dealing with the means, not necessarily are you dealing with the end. Sometimes we're more focused on the purpose. You have to get to where you want to go. If you don't get to where you want to go, then what's the purpose? I had to go to Los Angeles one time. I had to go to Los Angeles, that's where I'm from. Now, Los Angeles, long trip. I don't even take for the direct flights, I take with stopovers. But even with or without that, 20 hours, 25 hours, if they'll make it 16 hours, doesn't make a difference. It's a long trip. A part of being a long trip, which doesn't bother me, is the expense. It's a very expensive trip. It's very expensive. It's over $1,000. It's very expensive. Okay, so you had no choice to do. But you know, I really want to go on first class. That's not really true, but it's fine. Pretend. I really wanted to go on first class. You want to do my Amla did not my salary yet, so I'm still not going first class. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So I was checking out the ticket for first class. Oh, it's crazy. It said, forget it, I'm on to it. But I really want to go in first class. So I called and I found out that getting a trip to England on first class is the same price as getting a coach to Los Angeles. So I bought a first class ticket to England instead of getting a coach to Los Angeles. And I got my first class ticket. What a dodo brain, right? What a dodo brain. You're going the wrong place. What does it help where you're sitting? Nice and comfortable with all the fancy food. It doesn't help. You have to get to the point. And when you want to get to the place you want to get to, that's where you have to go. So if that's true, then you have to remember that's the klal and chinuch. This is the one klal that I want to get over today. And again, when we'll already start next week, Leonardo, with the teenager Mehalach. But this is all we're focused on. The focus on always remembering the matarat. Now, what is our ya'ad? I'll mention a few of our points, or a few of our points that we're aiming for. First of all, we want them to be happy children, right? That's our focus. We are aiming that our children should be happy. They should be satiated, have menuchat nefesh, be satiated with life. That's something that we want them to have, right? Isn't that something that everybody would be very satisfied to see a child being happy? Second of all, you want them to be successful in life. Now, how do you define success? Well, obviously, each parent is to his own. In our world, obviously, it's in ruchniyat, obviously, to be able to be connected, to be an Oved Hashem properly. In the, let's say, less religious world, but also by us, it's not a contradiction, but doesn't believe in it, obviously successful. One is talking about monetarily, comfortably, to be able to be taken care of. But these are all ya'adim, these are all focuses that we're trying to do. We want a kid who's happy, successful, who has meaning to his life is another important thing, that he finds meaning to being alive, to wanting to be here. And by doing that, he knows and is able to appropriate what his kochot are. What are my capabilities? What are my potentials? Many children never know what they're good at because they never hear it. They usually hear what they're bad at. Most of the time we're busy giving our tochacha, and especially the teachers, I know, but and they're hearing about the things that they're not good at necessarily, as opposed to the focus on what they could do and what they're capable of doing. And that's really the success of a child. The success of a child specifically comes from there, from being able to know what I'm good at and what I should utilize for my future. And lastly, number 5 on the list of the different things that I'm mentioning over here, and is probably the most important, is to be able to learn, and again, you have to know how to do this, to be able to know self-restraint, to be in control of my body, and my body is not in control of myself. Such a person has absolute bliss as growing up as a child. We cannot give happiness to our children. You cannot, doesn't matter how many dollars you give them, doesn't matter how much money they get, doesn't matter how many prizes and presents. I had a relative who, all of Toys R Us, I never had to go to Toys R Us. I went to this relative's in my house, Toys R Us was there. Everything was there. And I'm not going to tell you what happened with the children per se. Oh, they bought them happiness. They bought them happiness. No. You can earn them happiness that they can figure it out themselves. Teaching them to have self-restraint in the right places, to be able to be absolutely in control. And one of my old Chinuch shirim, I showed the video. I think all of us would know about the marshmallow test. I'm not going to go through it. The old marshmallow test from the 60s. They did it again in the 80s. We're all familiar with it, right? The one, you're familiar with it? No? Oh, what's with the Almaratzis? What is this? The marshmallow test. There was in the 60s, they did it. I even had the video of it, and I actually showed it in one of the shirim. It's basically that they tested many children with 2 marshmallows in front of them. They put them in a closed room with a one-way mirror, so they didn't know anyone was looking. They said 5 minutes. They put one marshmallow. They said, sit here 5 minutes. You can eat the marshmallow if you want, no problem. You can eat it. But if you don't eat it, then you should know, then you get 2 marshmallows afterwards. Okay, you get 2 more. This is a test you can do in the 60s. In the 80s, they already had to use, fancy ice creams and a little bit more exciting. Marshmallows just not going to no-go in the 80s. But anyways, that's what they did, and they show all the different children. It's just an incredible thing to see. I mean, you could look on Google. You can go. It's incredible to see the different patterns of the different children. How some just like were barzel, an iron dome. They didn't move. They just stood there and looked at the marshmallow until they came in and they got their 2 marshmallows. Beautiful. And there were some that was almost humorous. Like right when the door closed, after the parent talking, they closed the door, whoop, and in the mouth. That was it. It was gone. It wasn't even there. It's incredible. And then you saw some chacham balaylas that you see them with their fingers, they're walking around the marshmallow, looking at it all angles, going around, playing for 5 minutes around the marshmallow. in doing that. And you see other geniuses that they didn't take the whole marshmallow, they took like a piece, like a little bit. By the time the 5 minutes was up, about 3/4 was gone. So I don't know if they got the extra marshmallow. But the test that they did 25 years later, this is a Harvard test, that they checked 25 years later, and it was mamish, they said 90% results were like this. The ones who were able to resist, who had the koach, the self-restraint, the ones that really had those capabilities, they're the ones who are really successful in life. What they call successful. They're the ones who are very wealthy people, or very matzliach people. Then most of the people, the one who slammed it right into their mouth was a criminal in jail for 15 years as a prisoner, right? And then everyone had their different things. And that's why the koach of self-restraint is real satisfaction. And again, you have to know how to get there, but that is a place that we're getting to be able to teach them self-restraint, even more than ruchnius kibiyachol. Because if a child knows how to be in control of himself and his body stays in control, so then he'll be able to do this. This is it. That's the focus. I'm going to give you a few examples now, but that's the focus. We want to get him goals that we want our child. And you have to cheshbon it with your wife. You have to get your spouse. Cheshbon, make a calculation. What is the goal that we want for our child to be with? And by doing that, we will be able to last for a longer period of time. It will last at a completely base. It's not here just for the here and now, it's there for the later part. And that's what I want to say. The pasuk, everyone focuses on Hanoch lenar al pi darko. Of course it's true. Each child, give him his own. But the main focus of that pasuk is the latter half of the pasuk. It's the second half. Gam ki yazkin, that even when he gets older, lo yasar mimeno, I won't leave. You have to remember that's the whole goal of chinuch. It's not that now he listens to you. If you're doing it for the here and now, it will not last. It won't work. It'll be until you turn your face around and he'll do it again. And even if it works for a few years, when he gets older, it ends up just falling apart in the teenager years. It doesn't go. You have to make it that it grows on him, that he appreciates. It comes from a place of actual independence, and therefore it comes with a proper cheshbon when to do things. There's a story with Rabbi Kamenetsky, which kind of brings out this concept. Rabbi Yaakov was at a meeting in Torah V'dat with a number of people, and they had refreshments on the table. They had good American danishes and cookies and all these types of things. And it was at someone's house. So there's a 4-year-old who noticed the goods that was on the table, and he kind of went behind one of the chairs, climbed on Rabbi Kamenetsky's lap. He went on the table, started crawling towards the middle of the table. It was a big wide table, it's a very large house, right? Started right in the middle of the table. He snatched a couple pieces of cake, and he went down and escalated down on the other side, on the other chair, on the other way around, and he went and had his fill. And his father was so upset at him. He was gonna, his father was going to take him to the room to be, quote unquote, Mechanech, as they say. He was going to take care of him. So Rabbi Yaakov told him, you should know, you could think that's called Chinuch, but that's not really called Chinuch. I venture to say when the kid is 23, he's not going to do the same thing. That's what I venture to say. I don't think that's going to happen. Chinuch is when you're taking a matara because you see a problem that will be led to in the future, that will happen. Just because he calls and tries to take a snack in the middle of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who he has no idea Rabbi Yaakov is with his beard, as opposed to the president of the shul with his beard also. He doesn't know what the difference is between one person and the next. So therefore, that's not necessarily called Chinuch. In other words, Rabbi Yaakov is telling us, and we'll be quoting him here and there, we focus on the ya'ad, we focus on the purpose, the matara, the goal, where am I going, what am I trying for, is this purposeful? I think before I act. I'm double checking before I do the act. Is it true what I'm doing, or is it not? Am I making sure that the appropriate thing I'm doing is there to be able to take the right thing? You know, one of the best games that's known about in the Rishonim, the only game I think that's ever mentioned by the Rishonim, I'm talking about over 1,000, 1,200 years ago, it's mentioned in Old Sfarim, is chess. Chess, what an old game. Shachmat. Shachmat, what they call it. They have another name in Old Latin for it. Right? But chess is an old game that happened. It was even before Monopoly. Incredible. Right? It's older than any one of these old games from the thing. Before any games, it was chess. Chess was a game that's always been around from the beginning of creation, it seems like. And I always wonder, why was chess such a chashuv thing? Even the Rishonim quoted sometimes. They talk about playing chess on Shabbat or things like that. Why was chess an important game? If anything, it's bittul Torah. But the answer is chess is an incredible game. You know why? Because the only way to play proper chess is you have to think 3 steps in advance. You cannot be successful. The biggest chess champions know exactly how to think ahead very quickly. They're a kluger. They know how to think ahead to be able to be smart enough to be able to not just say, okay, well, he moved here. I won't say if I move here, then he's going to move there. Then you have to think 6 steps ahead. It almost makes you crazy sometimes when you start doing it. You just say, okay, I'm just moving. Right? But that's a real smart chess player knows how to think ahead. And if this chess player would move it into Chinuch, he'd be the best Mechanech ever. That's really how you have to be Mechanech. You have to think ahead many times before you go ahead and take a reaction or an action before you go into going in and acting in a certain way. Classically speaking, when a child does something, we'll automatically want to react in a certain way. Okay? Well, we have to react in a certain way. Or let's go before that. Let's say I want to tell him not to do something. Seder, I'm coming here to tell a child not to do a certain thing. Really, usually we'll tell him not to do something because we don't want him to do it, period. Come back at 8 o'clock. You tell him, please come back at 8 o'clock. I'm not going to the age. Let's say 7 o'clock. Come back at 7 o'clock. Why did you tell him to come back at 7 o'clock? I don't know. I just said Bali. It came to think. But are you being mechashben before you do that? How much Gehenim are you going to have to go through before this kid comes back at 7 o'clock? Are you sure you're giving an accurate time before you tell him to do such a thing? Sometimes you have to be mechashben if it's kedai to make that commandment, to make sure that he really will keep the commandment. Now, I'm not saying not to tell kids not to do. We definitely should, and that teaches self-control, and it's important to teach them. But a Mechanech thinks a few times over before he gives the command to make sure, A, the kid will be able to commit to it, or B, even if he can't commit to it, I'll be able to make sure that he commits to it, that I'll be able to make sure that he'll be able to follow through to it, and I'll be able to automatically make sure that there will be a follow-up to what we're discussing. In other words, that's called Hinuch. You're focusing on what's going to happen. You're focusing on the future. How do I speak to someone to be able to make sure that it will actually occur in a way that I want it to do? Why? Because I'm not focusing on myself. I'm focusing on him. I'm focusing on what's good for him. It's good for him to know he can't be out till the end. He has to know self-control. Kids come back at 7 o'clock. This age, whatever age it is, kids at this age come back at 7 o'clock. So I decided that this is the important time for him to come, and this is something I can follow through. He's going to give me a tantrum. I'll try to work on it. He has to do it, but that's the important time. But it shouldn't come out of because I have a specific whim, because I decided that's the appropriate thing that needs to be done. You understand? Here's a better example. This example I like very much. And I'll tell you the truth. This is 20 years ago, but in my beginning Chinuch stages, I didn't realize this at the time. And I think this is a perfect example of being able to figure this out. One with a boy, one with a girl. If a room has to be cleaned. Now, a room has to be cleaned because it's a mess. So you tell the kid to clean the room. Now, just because the room is this messy, does that mean that this kid specifically is capable of cleaning the whole entire room? Or that's his position to do it? Again, I'm telling him to clean the room. Why? Because I want him to learn self-control. I want him to learn that sometimes an Abba says something and you have to listen. Or I want him to learn that if something's a mess, it has to be tidy, it has to be kept up to. Now, because his two younger brothers also made a mess, all right? And of course, always the older brothers have to clean up for everybody else also, their mess. Does that mean that now he has to be punished, that he has to clean up the whole entire room, which he himself is not capable of? If he's capable of, so tell him to clean the room. Seder, if you know he can do it. And if it means a little bit of a push, beseder. But we usually go with the standards that because the room is X dirty, so that's what it has to do. A girl is told to wash dishes. How many dishes does she have to wash? As many dishes are in the sink. You don't do half the dishes. What are you, crazy? When the dishes are that much dishes? So that's what she has to do. Obviously, that's what you have to do. So that means a girl who's in a household of 3 children and a girl who's in a household of 13 children, they have different rules in life. Every person, according to the age appropriate, and according to the ofi, whoever their personality is, what they're good at, or what they're capable, they are told to do what they're good at. You have to make it age appropriate for whatever age they're good at, and appropriate to their ofi, right? Is there a better word? Personality? Characteristics, right? That's a good word, right? According to the characteristics, that's how you go ahead and you appoint an assignment. You appoint what they need to do. And like I said, yes, don't learn from your teachers. Seder, teachers are not able to do that. Teachers tell them, you shut up and you quiet and stop going, get out of the class and do this. And I have no tightness on them because they have 30 kids in the class, poor people, right? I myself am a teacher in a girls' school, right? So you can't do anything. I don't do that, by the way, just don't get into things. But I'm saying it's a hard thing. You have to deal with too many people. You, Baruch Hashem, have whatever amount of kids you have. Some people have a classroom in the house also, but each one is your own individual child, and you know what to do. I tell you, I do this personally with my own children, right? I said this in the old Chinuch shirim, and it still applies nowadays. I'm still in charge of Friday cleanup. Somehow I still got this job. That's my job, okay? I don't do any cooking in that. I don't make the children to the house. So I'm still in charge of Friday cleanup. So when I was younger, I was fresh, early in the early days. So I would tell a child to do a job, and then if you wouldn't do it, well, you just finished your job already, finish the job. But when you become a little bit more educated, so you know which kids are good at what, And therefore, those jobs should be appropriated to each child. That's really what a person should be doing. There's some kids who are good at taking a pile of stuff because they're just the ADHD kids or something like that. They have to be moving left and right, and able to do that. So they're the ones who could take 5, 6, 7 things and put them away in the place. And Shalom Al Yisrael. Some girls, usually a girl who's much more mesudar, organized, and so she's the one that can fix up the closet or have to do whatever needs to be done to fix things up. Or like I said, maybe to wash the dishes or things like that. Or who's in charge of setting the table? Officially, my daughter has always loved setting the table because she loves doing it in 16 different colors and making all the flowers, and the flowers are the same colors as the flowers. So it's great. That's a great thing. Why not? It just works well because that connects to a person. So you have to be able to figure out the specific ofi of each individual child. And that's it. I'll tell you a personal myself. I'm not sure if I can say like women's share because my wife is going to be there. So I'll just tell you. I have one child who is who is AT, right? You know, the autistic type of child. I'll be honest with you. And she can't really clean very much at all. Can she? Can't do. She doesn't. Let's put it that way. Right? It doesn't happen. It's just not her thing. So the kids very much complain. They complain about it. They say it's not fair. We're all cleaning up, but why doesn't she get to do it? So be'etzem, you know what my response to it basically is? And I don't mean to say it in a negative way, but I say, Seder, you want to be in the same category as her, then you don't have to clean either. And they take that as a necessary response. But you know what? I never tell her not to do anything. She's in charge of opening the bags of the garbage bags and putting it inside the garbage can. Right? When the bags are empty, she's in charge of putting the garbage bags inside of that. Or that's A. And the second job is, I'm just throwing it out because it's just jobs that you see as appropriate for any, she can do it even though she's got certain limitations to do that. She's in charge of taking the eggs out of the container and putting it in the refrigerator. She feels great about it. She always laughs about it. She's very positive. I say, wow, look how good I am at this. Right? She's like, the egg person. No one's allowed to do it. Chas v'shalom. No one touches the eggs. It's her job. That's just to do. And that's just a good example of how you're able to appropriate according to a person, and you don't push what it is, and you don't have to, no kid has to be jealous of the other ones, because everyone has their own stature, their own place, and everybody has their own position of what they're good at. And it's a shame when people try to overlap and try to give people jobs of where you're trying to put a defeat. Again, it's not for you. It's not for your house to be clean. It's not for the food to be cooked. It's not for the dishes to be clean. Or it's not for for you to make sure that he's back at a certain time. It's for the child. When you're focused on the child, to be able to see what you can do, so then you will be successful. Okay? That's the idea. If I can use an expression which Pachet Yitzchak Rav says in one place, sometimes you can win the battle, but you lose the war. You lose the war. And many people have to say, if you don't do the chinuch in the right way, you're winning battles because you get them to do it. You get them to go there, you get them to do and be appropriate for what he needs to do, but you end up losing the war because he's not really there. He doesn't feel connected to what he has to do and what he has to feel, and he doesn't feel connected to the actual thing. And therefore it's not, it doesn't help. Seder, that's an important concept, what it is. I'll give you another example, which is important by me. It is off by 5 minutes. I'm at 9:10 right now? Yeah. That's why I am? Okay, we'll finish 5 minutes. Seder, 5 minutes, 9:15, we'll stop. Seder, we'll stop at 9:15. This is a very important piece by me. This is something I feel is very important, and this is something that I have, it takes practice to get there, but you have to get here. You have to perfect this. There's something that's called a threshold. A threshold. Anyone who's spoken to me in Hinuch in the past knows that this is something very big by me. There's something that's called a threshold. Now, a threshold means that we all have thresholds of what makes us tick, what makes us stop, what stops us in our place, what gets us interested, and what not. You always want your kid's threshold to be as low as possible. As low as possible. Meaning you have to do as little as possible to get him to do the things that you're interested to do. The ideal Mechanech, and I'm taking the ideal Mechanech, and this is not something that's out of the ballpark. You can do this. If you started your Chinuch early enough, it should work. Is when the kid does something wrong, he can look at Abba, who gives him a disappointed face, right? Or, like some type of face that looks like, a little nod or something like that, and he'll take his hand out of the cookie jar. Or he just won't do it. That is the ideal Mechanech. You don't have to do anything more than that. A good teacher in a class, they all know, gives a certain expression, or a certain quiet, or a silence, and that's it. There's a hush in the thing. A teacher who's ruined his threshold, right? Why? Because he's a man of raised voices, and unfortunately, I get to hear an experience from children. I'm sure we've heard this in the past, that sometimes of the teacher that from the first day is already with a raised voice, already screaming at this child or throwing this child out. It's such damage. It's just so backfire. That's a person who's completely looking at the first class ticket. They just want to be, and they're not looking where they're going. Get to where you have to go. You're wasting your time. Because when you do that, the raised voice just gets louder and louder and louder, because that raised voice, you broke his threshold. After 2-3 times of him being scared at you, he won't be scared anymore, especially the boys, right? They'll stop being scared. And therefore, it's not going to be effective anymore. You're just going to have to raise the ante. You'll have to raise the threshold, and therefore you'll have to move it up to a louder voice, and then maybe a slam here and there, or a little hit, or locking up in the room, and then, have v'hala, and then if it gets to the older ages, lo aleinu, and this is cases that happen, that people throw them out of the house, you just get them out of the house. I just don't want you here, because you're a chutzpah, and you're a waste of time. Why are you here? You're just not like anybody else. You're this, and all these derogatory statements, lo aleinu, that no one should ever say to a child. But all these things, where does it come from? Because you just have no patience, because the threshold was broken. You're always trying to lower your ante. Even if you are at a screaming stage, you can still lower it. You can still try to get him when he's doing something a little bit wrong, to show a little bit of disappointment, and from there, to stop him. You understand? To show this with a little bit of disappointment, that he's put in control with just a little bit of a disappointment from where it comes from. It's so funny, those people who are the most upset at the schools because the Rebbe punishes or the Rebbe raises his voices, many times walk into their house, put a little camera, they're the ones who are punishing, they're the ones who are raising their voices also. They seem to be, Chazal say, kol poisel b'mumu poisel. They usually have the same, they're upset at the schools for doing what they're doing, but in their own right, they should be doing. So this is the yesod of what we're learning, to be able to know when to take things in the right ante, in the right place, to be able to do it. And therefore, a person has to judge every case to where it is. And that means, like I said, playing a game of chess. That really is what it means. Thinking ahead, being able to... Does it mean that it doesn't say in the Mishabura that everyone has to sit at the Shulchan Shabbat. Not everybody has to sit at the table of Shabbat. Now, am I saying that everyone should jump out right after Kiddush? No, it really depends on the situation. But it's nowhere written that it has to be Torah Misinai, that everyone sits at the Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch does write one thing, though. The Mishabura does write in 2 places where the Shalal Kodesh, he goes out of his way, and the Mishabura is not a Musar Sefer, he's a Halacha Sefer. He goes out of his way in 2 places to write that people who bring their kids to shul and they make a rowdy fuss and they make noise and they do this and they disturb in the shuls, he speaks very strongly against those people. He says you're only Mechanech them to hate shul or to not like shul, or they learn that shul is just a play yard, it's a place that's not respectful, and he says, and therefore it shouldn't happen. In other words, the Mishabura is teaching us a little bit Hinuch. He's saying, think ahead, is this child ready to come to shul or not? So classically, when people teach me what age should he come, that's not a good question. You don't say what age they come. What's with the child? You get to an age where he sees you going to shul and go, Abba, I really want to come to shul. Can I come also? Well, when you get a little bit older, you can. A little bit older. You wait another month or 2 months, 3 months. When you get a little bit older, oh, maybe now you're old enough, then it's a prize. It's a prize to be able to come to shul, and he'll be able to be disciplined. That's a person who's thinking ahead to be able to do it, not with the do's and don'ts. At age 8, he should be already in shul. Come to shul. Wake up. What's wrong with you? It doesn't always help to do that. It has to be to a stage where he wants to come, where it's a little bit of pulling himself into doing it. Every situation is to his own. We can't give to, for each individual situation. But that's the idea of a Mechanech, of being able to know when the age appropriate is for each thing, and then you're able to do it. Chazal told us, on this I finished, Chazal told us that to be Mekayim every mitzvah to say, what is the right age for being Mekayim a mitzvah to say? A positive commandment. You know what the right age is? The answer is it depends on the mitzvah. And it depends on the child. It's a mafurish halacha. That's what it is. It's brought in Shibam Gimel in Hilchot Shabbat, and it's brought in a couple of places in Yoreh Deah also. In Hilchot Melamdim, the idea of what is the age appropriate, there is no age appropriate. For tefillin, we wait till bar mitzvah. We don't mechanech there. For tzitzit, you're supposed to do it earlier. 3 is a mistake. It's actually a mistake. We do it from 3 because they tell us to do it. But it's a time that he can actually take care of his tzitzit. Kippah, everything has to be according to the appropriate age, according to where he's able to do it. So therefore, all mitzvot, all things have to be done age appropriate. Everything has to be done. And that is Chazal teaching us what Chinuch is about. Thing has to be done according to the mitzvah, to the child, according to where he's holding at the time you're doing it. A bracha is when he's able to know when a Kodesh Baruch Hu is, to have a hakara of who he is, of where he is, when you're supposed to do it. Probably about the age of 37. Okay? That's usually what it's, right? Am I right? I don't know. I'm still having trouble. But b'ikaron, that's the idea. You have to find out when things are the right time, and that's it. So I'm telling you, mufurish from Chazal, that things go according to age appropriate, not just when we decide it's the appropriate thing. Always focus, and this is the yesod, always focus on the matara, on the yad. Gam ki yaskin, lo yasamim anoi. If you do that, if you're always focused on the purpose of in, then you will come out with gam ki yaskin, no matter how old he is, it won't leave him. It will be with him until the end.